My name is Alicia Roberts Novak, and I'm the host of the Generation X Studio. We felt that, this would be a good way for us to kind of talk about an era that seems to be kind of forgotten, right?
Welcome to the Gen X Studio, where members of Generation X come onto the show to tell their stories. Our goal is to document not only the experiences of growing up Generation X, but also share our perspectives with future generations, in the hope that they can learn about the past and use that knowledge to help build a better future. Join us and find out what makes Generation X great. Let's go.
I grew up in Inglewood, and we had a very nuclear family. My family we lived in a 2-flat. We lived upstairs. My aunt and uncle, her kids lived downstairs. So we had family all around us. I walked to the local Catholic school, St. Raphael, and which was a very holistic experience. And we had our parents there. So it was really good, You remember the rotary telephones? You may not remember that. I'm really dating myself. Generation X, right? We actually had a lock on our phone. So some of you may not know that. That's when your parents didn't want you to use the phone without their permission. And there was a lock, and you can only, dial so far. And you would pick up, and sometimes there would be a party line. So our next door neighbors would be on the phone, and you had to wait for them to finish their phone call before you could make a phone call. But I appreciate those things. I don't appreciate the powdered milk. So I also grew up at a time drinking powdered milk and also sugar bread. If anyone knows anything about sugar bread, you just take a white piece of bread, put some sugar on it, get the excess sugar off and eat it. That was your dessert. But it was still, there was a lot of love in the house. And so if I was poor, I didn't know I was poor. So I may be talking about things that you say, oh, she was so poor. Maybe so, but I didn't know that I was poor because there was a lot of love in the house. And then somewhere around the time I was 5, things changed. And that's when my brother came along. The dynamics of our family changed as well.
So growing up in that era, I could think back my earliest memories. I think about I think at 4 or 5 years old, we literally we had a corner store, Mr. and Mrs. Dosey. It was the neighborhood store, had everything from stockings to milk to anything, little gold jewelry. And I remember parents used to write us a letter, and we can go get cigarettes, we could do whatever without no money. All we had to do is say, hey, on Friday, my mom said, would she get paid? And literally, I remember Miss Dosey used to have a whole little book that she would just write a little ledger of who owed money and things like that. Then I remember one time I took it a little too far, and I think my mom, we needed like a loaf of bread, and my mom was late for work, and she didn't have time to go get it, so she gave me like $20. And I just knew $20 was a lot. I think bread was probably 15 cents. So I'm seeing all of this change come back. So it being like my birthday was like a couple days away, I took it upon myself to kind of treat myself. So I bought all of these comic books. I don't know if you remember, they used to have like a little Playboy bunny necklaces with a little red eye. I bought me a little necklace and I come back home and I have like $1.50 change. So my sisters was like, ooh, you gonna get it.
Growing up around that time, I grew up in a huge family. I'm the youngest of 9. So we grew up in clusters of 3s, the older 3, the middle 3, the younger 3. And being the younger 3, you got a chance to experience a lot of different dynamics of the family. But one particular story is that I think I was about 5 years old. And I remember my oldest brother, he's 18 years older than me. So that's a huge difference. Could actually be my father. So I get up early morning, go down in the basement, and he's home. He had went to the Vietnam War and had come home and was on leave. And so I go downstairs and I see this man downstairs that I didn't even know. And so I run upstairs and I tell my mom, I say, Mom, there's a man in the basement. She's like, no, that's your brother. I'm like, where did he come from? And I was like, he looks nothing like me, Mom. What? And so, but that is like classic as far as the family dynamics and just growing up in a large family. I was known as birth control for my sister when she was in high school, and and she's like 17 years older than me, so they would send me out on her dates with her, and so I was that guy.
And the other thing is just really remembering how close the entire community was. Like we had, not only did we have family live in the house, but like that was an era where everybody was your cousin, or we called them play cousins. And they were just as close as blood. You know, our parents grew up together. They were all getting their first houses together and raising different family members. So we all looked out for one another. The babysitter, Miss Blackburn on the neighborhood, she babysitted like the whole neighborhood. So we all grew up playing together. And with me having an age gap between my sisters, that I had to have like form my own little friends and things like that. Then, being able to my parents got better jobs, and we were able to move out of Inglewood and move to the Gresham community. And now I became, what would you call it, latchkey kids. And I just remember like the responsibility that we used to be able to have to get a key with a little shoestring around your neck, where you were coming home and, you had certain rules: don't turn on the stove, don't do this and don't do that. But yeah, just being able to walk the streets. I think school was probably like 8 blocks away, and being able to walk with crossing guards and things like that, of course, but being entrusted and not being able to have another adult home for hours. And, and so that, these type of things today are probably not able to be put in place.
And like when I grew up, my family was really tight-knit. We did everything together. We would have these huge barbecues, and we would have like extended family come over, and it was just fun times. And as we've gotten older and time has passed, and nowadays we don't really do that anymore. And I yearn for that. I miss those times that we would all get together in the backyard. Funny story. My father, one of my brothers, he was an art student or whatever. So the big barrel garbage can, the grills. My brother painted it like a Slit Small Liquor Bull beer can. And everybody in the neighborhood was like, "Mr. Crenshaw, I got the coolest barbecue grill." Some of the things that I, kind of still keep about my dad. My dad is no longer with us, but in my heart, he's still here as far as some of the things that he instilled in us. Like the values of just taking care of your home, taking care of your family, and being there for them. My dad was a hard worker. He worked in the steel mills in South Chicago. And during that time, it was just, I would rarely see my dad. It was just like, because he worked such an odd shift. He worked from 4 in the afternoon to 12 midnight. And I was in school at 9 o'clock, going to school for 9 o'clock. He was in the bed. When I got home from school, he was gone to work. So it was very rare that I would see my dad. And then on the weekends, he did a lot of like carpentry work and things like that, handyman work. So he was always gone. But I would look for those nights when he would just miss us so much that when he got home, he would cook a broiled chicken in the oven and cook dinner. And you can be asleep and you just smell it. And we would wake up and we would eat with him and just love on him. But those were really good times. I think back to that.
So I went to a parochial school, the neighborhood parochial school, and that's where I did my elementary school. It was like family. It was very holistic, very different than when my kids went to school. My kids went to school. I wasn't so trusting of school. I started them off homeschooling. And then when they did go into the public system, it was very different than when I went into the public school system. I went to Lindblom Technical High School, and it was nurturing. It was family. When you talk about the family, it is family at Lindblom, and we all still have that connection.
It was my 8th grade teacher, Miss O'Leary. She was the one who saw potential in me, because I didn't see the potential in myself at the time. But she saw potential in me, and she said, you should apply to go to Lindblom. There was a standardized test you had to take to get into Lindblom, and scored on that test, scored well enough to get in, and the rest was history. I was in Lindblom, and I looked around, and I was in a whole new neighborhood, had started getting new friends, and started having a different outlook on what I want to do in life. And I was like, wow, because Lindblom just opened my eyes to it as far as the teachers, the classes, and just seeing other kids with ambitions. I grew up on 91st, right off of Stony Island, right near Pill Hill area. But coming from that area and going over to Inglewood, it was a challenge every day. But I knew that I wanted to do it. There was, always, some different types of things you had to go through. And I remember specifically, I was the basketball coach, one of the basketball managers at Lindblom, and the basketball team had just lost a game. We were at home, and the coach was yelling at them. And I'm saying to myself, I'm packing things up like, I really don't need to listen to all this. So I leave out early, catch the bus, and I get down to 63rd and State, and it was like a group of guys coming from Inglewood High School, had this nice leather jacket on. They wanted that leather jacket so bad, but they got it.
So when I went to college, I signed up for science. I wanted to be a nurse until I discovered what nurses do. Diana Carroll was not dealing with blood and things like that, so it wasn't as glamorous as I thought. So I switched my major from nursing, and I got a degree in biology and a degree in chemistry. From there, I became a research microscopist, and I got that from Cher. I watched Silkwood. You guys are probably too young to know what Silkwood is and Cher, but she was a research microscopist, and I wanted to be like Cher, and I became a research microscopist. So it wasn't later that I became a teacher. Growing up, I didn't see teachers that looked like me. Even though I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, the majority of the teachers were white. And so I didn't see anyone to look like me. Even when I got my graduate degrees, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. So it wasn't later on until I decided to become an educator. And I made that decision through educating my own children. I started homeschooling them, started creating homeschool curriculum. And from there, I realized I was a teacher. So teaching is something that I was, not just something I wanted to do.
I had one goal, and this is what has made my life a foundation. I know how to set a goal, and then when I put that out in the universe brings me a way to accomplishment. So my goal, my father, when we moved from Inglewood to Gresham, we bought our first home. And I remember asking my father, like, how much it costs to get a house and things like that. And he told me he had a VA loan and how it helped them get that. And that's all I understood. So I did some research and found out that you can go to the military, they give you this thing called a VA loan, and you could buy a house. And us moving from a little apartment where me and my sisters all shared one bedroom and I'm the only boy, then to go to a home where each of us had that was a huge impact on my life. So I was obsessed with wanting to have a home, but just like when you set goals, you have to have a time period to it. I wanted to have one when I was 21. So coming out of Lindblom, graduating 18, I did the math. I really ended up in the recruiter's office just asking that question. If I served 3 years in the military, would I be able to get this VA loan, get a house? He said, yes. I said, sign me up. I had no idea what I signed up for. Actually signed up to be a cook. I have sisters. I've never even boiled an egg before. But just that decision, I became to be able to train to be a chef. I traveled for all around the world. Actually got to cook for King Fahd in Saudi Arabia. And all types of things opened up in my life for that one decision. Then to come back here when I got back from Desert Storm and bought my first home at 21.
Jumping from Lindblom, because I went to Lindblom, I really enjoyed my time there, the friends I made, and just developing. And as I started to develop, I realized that I wanted to go to college. Because at first it was like just a thought, but then I realized like I have to go to college in order to really prosper and make it where I want to make it. And so I started focusing and concentrating on that. And one time, and I wanted to go to a HBCU, and I got accepted, but I knew my parents really couldn't afford to send me there. So I settled on a state school, and then I settled on Northern Illinois University. So I looked at both my sisters went there, they made it through there. I had been up there and was kind of familiar with it, so that's where I ended up. But, and it was a challenge at that time too, because going there, it was quite a few blacks there, but we were still a huge minority population there. And I went there with that struggle and started thinking about that I wanted to go into pre-pharmacy at that time. And then I kind of got that out my notion when I started hitting the science classes. I was like, oh man, this is a little bit difficult. But so I ended up stumbling on a career that I am really satisfied with, and it really goes back to my father a little bit too, because looking back at growing up and seeing him work at the mill and coming home with burns on his body or different things like that, it made me really realize, and then eventually having lung cancer and dying from that, from asbestosis and things of that nature, it made me realize that this is what I want to do with my career, and that was that I wanted to do something that was going to help the lives of others, and that's why I chose on safety and health, and it's been a really rewarding career for me, because I feel that I have really played a part as far as helping educate workers about their hazards around them, and just being there for them.
When I became an educator, now that's opened up my eyes. It was just completely different. I started teaching in Chicago public schools, John Hope Community Academy actually, and I was teaching in a non-English speaking setting. So I was teaching science to all non-English speaking students. It was a fabulous experience. Dr. Hines, Common's mother, was my principal. She nurtured me, she mentored me. I became an assistant principal and a principal in Arizona after that. Arizona, that was an eye-opener. That was very different. Going to Arizona, I experienced a place where there was not licensed teachers, and so education was very different. And you're talking about 3,000 people coming to the Valley a week, moving into the Valley a week at the time I was in Arizona. I had a full-time enrollment person, and her only job was to enroll students. We had that kind of transition every day. So the best thing that I could do for me and my children after 5 years was to come back home to family. And so as an educator, I just try to evoke change. And that's what I do now, from being a teacher all the way now to being in higher ed.
Being an entrepreneur, which is something that's always rooted in me, but I did, like most people, came out of the military, got a career at CTA, and my whole goal during that period was understanding, or almost tricking myself, that I'm going to use their resources to plan my big plan and what I want to do. When I say play fun, like a lot of things, I retired at a young age from that career. I did a lot of things young, and it's funny because I tell people I'm actually lazy. That's why I work. So people say, how do you work so hard? Why do you do that? It's because I'm lazy, because I didn't want to do nothing in my 50s, nothing. The rest of my goal is to have more playtime than I did working. And so putting myself in a position after retirement, and then when you put certain things in place, then opportunities are falling in your lap. The bowling alley was something like that. A good friend who we had investments together, and the opportunity came that I would come on as a partner. And I really, other than like say bowling as a family out, I had no interest in bowling, but I saw it as a good investment in what I could do, and it actually opened up a whole nother world. I didn't know that older people, this is like their daily thing. They come here, I give them free coffee. They come here 5 days a week. They're literally bringing their pension checks and Social Security here to be here in this little bowling alley. Then the kids, I started a very robust youth program. I think I've given out somewhere like 16 scholarship free rides with bowling, once I found out that bowling was an underserved funding that was available for kids. So I was been able to enrich kids through that life, and then just really getting the whole community involved in family thing, and just being able to host so many events here for Lindblom, different classes doing their fundraisers or whatever it be. We've had like people like, how did a bowling alley become the hottest spot for repasses? I host so many repasses because people just like, oh, my dad or somebody went here, they have so much fun at your business, and people, just like you go, and I'm able to do this with my wife. And like people just like being in our space, and this is like an extension of our home to us. And we just want to continue to not only let this be like one stop, but we have different things that we want to do, because I consider myself still young, and I just want to use this. This is just another step in the ladder for the next level where I'm trying to go in life?
I can remember my son. I want to tell you this short story. You know, he was always late. You know, he missed his bus at school. I would have to leave work to pick him up. And so one day I said, you're going to have to walk if you miss the bus. He walked the route of the bus. When I got home, he was nowhere to be found. I had to look through the neighborhood for my son because it took him over 2 hours to get home, walking the route of the bus. Okay, it's like no critical thinking skills, okay? But STEM is important because we need to teach kids how to think, and they can integrate that into anything.
Well, I think Project Generation X is very important. I think it's well worth doing and thinking about, as far as even contributing your time, your money, your resources, whatever have you, because I think it's that important to make sure that kids growing up today understand some of the struggles that we've experienced and adversity we've overcome, but to give them hope that they too can overcome, whether it's not having enough money to go to college or not having the resources to have the finest things or whatever have you, but also just letting them know that those things are material and they're not important. What's really important is getting your education and finding a way to that path. And Generation X, I think, is a positive, but I know it's a positive aspect of getting that and reaching children to actually make them understand what they need to do.
Coming up next on the Gen X Studio, Fred and Joy sit down and discuss their childhood growing up together as siblings, while Fred, Darnell, and Alicia reminisce about the social scene during their teenage years. If you'd like to donate or be a part of the Gen X Project, contact us at GENXQUE, that's genxq.org.